We ready?
Hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Jill here with Illuminating Women, and this is our Wednesday coffee break and connect where you grab your cup of coffee or a glass of water or tea, and we just take 15 minutes to fill our toolbox with great new information. And so many of us right now are behind our computers more, we're writing more, we're putting out our blog posts, we're putting out social media or our newsletters. And I, for one, will tell you, I do like it when people go, hey, did you mean this word? Or did you see you maybe misspelled this? And I really like it because our writing absolutely reflects our professional brand. And it's important that our writing really speaks well and speaks to our intelligence, and our message gets there and people take our credibility seriously. So I had asked this amazing woman, she's a charter member with Illuminating Women. She's got an incredible background from the days in New York and vaudeville and dancing and all this stuff. And she's a delight to follow on social media. She fills your soul and spirit. But she's also quite the professional there is a gal on this call here who wrote a book and had her do some editing because she is an editor. And she speaks so well, writes beautiful. And I asked her to come share today with all of you some important things about our writing and some tips and takeaways that we can have. So Beata, welcome to this place. Thank you, and take it away. I'm excited to learn today.
Thank you so much. We're just going to cover some basics today because our time is pretty short, but it is interesting that Jill felt the need to do this particular topic because right now we really are in a time of very quick, tweets and texts, and does it really matter? Do grammar and syntax and style really matter? And I think it does. For me, it matters because I'm a child of the 50s. I went to school in the 60s, and text was all we had. The written word was what we had. We wrote letters. All of our bills came in the mail. We read books. There was no internet. The telephone was this big black thing that sat in a corner, and children were not allowed to touch it. And it was a whole different thing. And so spelling and grammar and syntax and proper usage was really beaten into your head at school. I went to Catholic school, so it was beaten into my hands as well by nuns with rulers, but that's a whole different story. But one of the things Jill touched upon in her introduction, I think, is something that pertains even in this world of texts and tweets and the lack of privacy, because you never know who's reading you. You never know who's watching, and that's why you want to pay attention. When you do something wrong, if you slip up, everybody does, but it can be read as a sign of sloppy thinking or a sign of laziness. And you really never know if there's a potential client or somebody who might hire you who would look at that and go, that's disappointing. And in the world of you never know who's watching, I just want to share a quick story of the daughter of a friend of mine, the grown daughter of a friend of mine, had recently tweeted something about being discouraged because she felt that in her attempts to be a better person, she wasn't getting very much support from her young friends. And she made this little throwaway comment about, I'm just going to keep listening to Mary J. Blige and I'm just going to be me. Well, Mary J. Blige tweeted her back. And they now have a correspondence and a relationship. And so you really never know. So that's why I think it makes a difference. Just make the effort because it really does reflect on your brand. So because we don't have a lot of time, I'm just going to touch on a few things that I see over and over again in the worlds of especially punctuation. I made little flashcards. I don't know if you can read this. The first one is about quotation marks, and this says, final punctuation stays within the quotation marks. You see how there's a period at the end here? It stays within the quotation mark. I see punctuation outside the quotation mark all the time. It doesn't matter if it's a period, if it's an exclamation point, if it's a question mark, it stays within the quotation marks. And when I first learned this, I thought it was kind of weird, but I worked with a wonderful editor who gave me a wonderful way of remembering it and thinking about it. She said, think of the quotation marks as protection. right? You're saying somebody else's words. You're repeating something that somebody else said. You want to get it right. So think of the quotation mark as it's protection. It's protecting their thought, their words, even the punctuation at the end. So that's an easy way to remember when you're writing a quote, keep that punctuation within the quotation marks. The second thing I see a lot is the use of acronyms. Acronyms are the initials that stand for a longer word. Illuminating Women, the acronym is IW. But very often people will just write in a blog, in a short article, in a feature, write the acronym, never explain what it is. Now, there are some things we hear about all the time. For instance, right now, the CDC, right? We're hearing about it all the time. But you might not know that CDC means Center for Disease Control. So when you're writing an article, a blog, a feature, always write out the word first, then put the acronym in parentheses. I realize that my parentheses here looks a lot like the C, so I apologize for that. But so write out the word, acronym goes in parentheses the first time only, and then after that, use the acronym all the time. But the main thing is you don't want to make your audience work too hard. You don't want to make things difficult for them. So just write it out, use the acronym in parentheses, and then after that, have at it. Apostrophes. This makes me crazy. You really don't need to use apostrophes as often as you think you do, and sometimes a little more than you should. So apostrophes are used in cases of omission. For instance, the word don't, which is short for do not. So that's an omission. There, you need your apostrophe. Possessive. Jill's house. You need an apostrophe because you're talking about a possession of hers. You really never use an apostrophe in plurals. And I see that all the time. Somebody will say chairs and put an apostrophe in there. Houses, put an apostrophe in there. The only time you use an apostrophe in a plural is when it involves individual characters, such as in the sentence, minding your P's and Q's, which is such an old-fashioned sentence that nobody uses anymore. So you almost don't even have to remember that. So remember, omissions like contractions, use an apostrophe. Possessive, use an apostrophe. Plurals, let that thing go. No apostrophes in plurals. A couple of other things, people capitalize words much more than they really need to. That's something that you learn in a style guide, which I'll point out later. But for instance, in a sentence like Mary Smith, the executive director of, you don't need to capitalize executive director. You're saying what she does, but it's not being used as a title. If the sentence read, executive director Mary Smith, then you capitalize all that. So this is something that is, it's almost personal for me because when I proofread my husband's stuff, he capitalizes everything. He loves capitalizing. So this is something I run into all the time. And, you know, once again, you don't need to most of the time. Make things easy on your reader. And especially if you're writing for something that's going to be online, people read differently online than they do on the printed page. And even on the printed page, you want to do shorter sentences, white space, make it easy on the eye. But on a computer screen especially, you get eye strain. Things can be difficult. And people want to know exactly what they're going to be, what's the gist of what you're in that first page, in that first frame. The old expression is above the fold. You know, in a newspaper, for instance, if this was a newspaper, it gets folded in half. And here's where your headline is and everything. What's above the fold is what people are really interested in. And so that's where you grab them, your headline, your subhead. The same is true for when somebody's looking at a computer screen. What's on that first page? You know, you really want to, like for your website, you want that to represent who you are and what you do. You don't want to make it hard for them. And when they're scrolling and reading, shorter sentences, shorter paragraphs, white space for the eye. Online bullet points are great because it helps people grab onto your basic ideas much faster. So the main thing is really be kind to your reader. Don't make them work too hard. Don't make them search for it. I had a little personal demon I had to fight because I think everybody should go to the dictionary once a day, but that's me. You know, I love words and I get excited when I discover new words, but some people really hate even thinking about going to a dictionary. So that's my thing. I had to get over that. Be kind to your reader. Make it easy for them. I'm going to end by recommending some books. This is, I don't know if you can see it. I've got all this sunshine. Switch over here. See if my rays of sun, there's better. So here's the Associated Press style book, AP style book. This one happens to be from 2013. They do a new one every year. You can also just belong online. You can get it online. This is a Bible. It has spellings. It has the way you shorten words. It has a whole thing for social media guidelines, media law, punctuation guide. It's really a fantastic reference book. If you find yourself doing more and more writing, I go into this probably every day to, you know, just make sure that I'm doing something right. This is where you find out things like, when do you capitalize something? When do you write out a number, 1 through 9? When do you start just using the numerals for it, 10 and up? This is where I found out things like that. So it's really a fantastic resource. If you find yourself doing more and more writing, I think it's a worthy investment, and it's a tax deduction. So get one of these. This is one of my favorite books on writing ever, Anne Lamott, Bird by Bird. Some of you may already have read Anne Lamott because she's such a wonderful writer on spiritual matters. And I especially love her because she's led a very messy life. It's no trick to being spiritual when you're a saint, but when you've had a really messy life, that's who I want to hear about. So she wrote this beautiful book called Bird by Bird, which is about writing. It's a wonderful and funny, because she's such a deeply funny writer. It's a great spiritual journey and a funny book as well. But this is where I got the very important lesson of giving yourself the gift of the crappy first draft. Lots of times when we start writing, we want it to be perfect right away, and we can't get out of our editing head. We keep changing and changing and changing. She said, don't do it. Just puke it out, spill it all out. Give yourself the crappy first draft. And I probably reread this like every 2 years. It's just a wonderful, wonderful guidebook. Last of all, this is ancient, Strunk and White, The Elements of Style. This book was first written in 1918. It's 102 years old. William Strunk, who was an English professor at Cornell University, created it because his writing students kept asking the same questions over and over again. And so he wrote it, and it was referred to as the Little Book because it's less than 100 pages. Everything in it is timeless, absolutely timeless. And then E.B. White, who especially those of you who are moms might know, because he wrote Stuart Little, he wrote Charlotte's Web, he wrote The Trumpet of the Swan, just a wonderful writer. Fun fact, he was also a cub reporter for the Seattle Times at one point, and for the Seattle Times Intelligencer, so he had a local thing. He was one of Strunk's students at one point, and he helped revise the book in 1959, and it's gone through a few revisions ever since, but it is timeless. Everything that is in it is still true. And it's, as you can see, it's tiny, tiny, easy to have. I love this because my father gave it to me when I first moved to New York in 1976. And that was kind of a sign of, oh, you really do think that I'm a writer as well. And, you know, that was just a lovely thing. So I've had mine forever. Everything in it still holds up. And because this is the last thing that I'm holding up, I want to end with a quote from E.B. White that was actually used in one of the more recent forewords of the reprinting of the book. He wrote, "All that I hope to say in books, all that I ever hope to say is that I love the world." Isn't that beautiful? And in our own writing, when we're presenting our brand, when we're putting forth our thoughts, isn't that our intention? I think especially as illuminating women, what we're trying to say is that we love the world. We love each other. We care for each other. And one of the ways you show that you love the world is just to pay attention, reread something, proof it, just, polish it a little more before you launch it. I think it's gotten so easy just to kind of, write and release. And it's like, just take a look, because you never know who's watching. And indeed, what our intention is that we love the world. And with that, Jill, I throw it back to you.
Oh, Beata, thank you. We're gonna have some questions, I'm sure, but
Okay.
I'm gonna stop the recording here in a little bit. There's some there's a conversation going on in the chat box and questions and whatnot. So, in one last thing that I think is really important, I know that urgency. There's so much going on. We want to get this message out. We got to get this out. We got to get that out. But truly to pause and take time and evaluate and edit. And really, if you have something very, very important, having somebody take a look at it and edit it is always
fresh eyes. It's called fresh eyes. If you've got somebody else in the house who can just read something for you, just put another set of eyes on it, because you get used to seeing something over and over and you don't see it anymore. I once worked for, was publishing a magazine, and there was a headline that we just got used to seeing, and it was literally said, "New headline goes here," and almost nobody caught it because you didn't see it. We put fresh eyes on it, and that person saw it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And that's important. Wow. And I love that you gave us some resources. They're in the chat box. I thank you, Tracy, for doing that. I'm going to stop the recording. This is on our Illuminating Women YouTube channel, where we just want to educate, because we believe that when women receive more education in a supportive group, that it encourages them and empowers them, making our families and our communities stronger, braver, and better. So thank you so much, Beata, for taking time and sharing with us. We're going to stick online for those who need to, because I'm sure there's some questions that are going to be asked here, and memory lane's going on. So thank you. And everybody else stay on and let's chat a little longer. Check us out at illuminatingwomen.com. Bye-bye.